Hello and welcome. So tonight we are here, Melanie and I are here with six teachers that we're going to introduce you to, and we're going to give you an opportunity to ask questions. And I am going to get started. I'm going to go around and ask the teachers one at a time to unmute themselves and give us a little intro. So, Banu, and if I'm saying your name wrong, let me know. I'm going to start with you.
All right, thank you. It's so great to be here.
Oh,
So, yeah, so I am Banu and I live in New Mexico, and I have been teaching on Insight Timer for 2019 or 2020, and lifelong meditator, lived in the ashram for 8 years. Um, and the focus of my work on Insight Timer is somatic awareness. And I am a trauma therapist and polyvagal specialist. And so I teach a lot about the nervous system and how we can track where we are in our internal landscape in our bodies. And so my focus is trauma informed and body-based somatic meditations and practices.
awesome. Thank you. And Eileen, I'm going to move over to you.
Hi, my name is Eileen Rose. I've been on Insight Timer for since 2020 as well. It was definitely the pandemic that brought me to the app, and I have been leading live meditations on Insight Timer weekly, and I currently live in Alaska. We just moved to a cabin in Alaska, but my husband and I have been traveling full time in a van for 2 years. So it's like a very groundless life where we're never quite super settled and home anywhere. So I'm excited to be home for a little bit here in Alaska, but a lot of my work is on self-compassion and coming back to the heart and self-love and just creating more awareness so that you can take your life back and really, really enjoy life and be present. And I lead my very own meditation teacher trainings too, which is really exciting and such a beautiful thing to help other people find their voice and trust that they have a gift. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Violet and Melanie.
Thank you. Thank you. I love that. I may have to get in touch with you. I could use some help finding my voice.
Yeah.
And Dia, do you say Dia? We're going to move on to you.
Yes. Hi, it's Dia, and I'm happy to be here. Thanks for organizing this. It's great to meet you all. So I've been a teacher on Insight Timer since 2019, I think, maybe earlier, but I have two courses on there. One's called The Return to the Feminine, which is really my love, because it incorporates yoga, which I have a history in yoga, and it incorporates advocating for women, which I'm a trauma informed counselor and a certified life coach, and I work with midlife women who are moving through transitions and trying to seek their joy and the more in life. So that course was kind of birthed from my own healing journey when I hit 50. So it's just, yeah, it's very special. And I also do lives on Insight Timer and offer meditations. And so, yeah, happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. Carrie?
Yes, thank you. Eileen Rose talking about the van life. I could have an hour of Q&A just with you asking about that. So thanks for sharing that. I've been on Insight Timer, I think since 2016 or 2017, and my work pertains mostly to energy healing, channeling. It's led me down a path of also doing deep possession work with spirits and supporting suffering spirits to the other side, whether that's a spirit within a person or a spirit within a space. Recently, well, 2 years ago, I published my own book on energy healing and intuition, and you can find, I made a miniature course on Insight based on that book. And then I have a little plethora of courses on energy healing, channeling, really connecting to your own intuition, which I know everyone has intuition. It's just a matter of taking some time to get to know that in our own way. So that's my favorite thing to teach on Insight is listening to our innate wisdom, because I know it can lead us on a path of self-awakening, a path of healing and discovering our own joy. So yeah, excited to be here and answer some questions today.
Awesome. Thank you. And Jill.
Thank you so much, Violet, and a thank you to Melanie for having me today. And before I introduce myself, I want to say a shout out. I don't know if she's on here. BD, a listener on Insight Timer who I have never ever met, connected me and referred me to Violet. So that's the power of Insight Timer and part of why I love it. And for those of you listening in, my name is Jill Weston, and I have been on the app as a listener, I believe 6 or 7 years. I went to my profile and it didn't tell me on my student account how long I had been here, but I too started offering lives in 2020 coming out of the pandemic, and I have 3 offerings up. What I love, I'm nicknamed the Stress Whisperer, and it came out of some different things that I'll talk about later. I love offering everyday practices for people who are maybe a little bit shy about getting into meditation, a little bit shy about getting into mindfulness. So my specialty, especially with the lives, is Yoga Nidra, and that's just a practice of a kind of a conscious awakening through a guided practice. Pretty simple, because you bring a pillow and a blanket and you lay down and you listen. But I really like to help people who, kind of a gateway, if you will, into mindfulness or meditation. And I'm just very, very happy to be here on Insight Timer.
Thank you for being here. Before I move on to Jill, I have to add that Jill made such an impression on me, because when she reached out to me, she said she had watched some of the replays and gave me an amazing compliment. And I was like, oh, no, that wasn't me. That was Melanie. And she wrote back to me. She says, you're not going to escape my compliments. And I was like, wow, what a profound thing to say. And I said to her, it's like you know me, because that's what I do. You know, even if there was a chance that the compliment was for me, I'd be like, oh, no, that wasn't me. That was, somebody else. So huge impression she made on me. And I was like, thank you for reminding me to accept compliments, because that's something I've been working on. And it escaped me at that time, but it came back. So thank you. And Joe.
Hey, everybody. My name is Joe Stasinski. I have been on Insight Timer for about 1.5 years as a teacher, but longer than that as a student. And it's been kind of a journey to get here. Prior to coming to Insight, I was in a different platform where I was doing a similar thing, where I was doing Reiki sessions, like virtual Reiki group sessions. And then that platform ended, and a lot of the folks came over to Insight with me. And special thanks to, like Jill mentioned, JV was the person that recommended me to you, Violet. So shout out to JV for that.
Awesome.
So the sessions kind of evolved on Insight to being Reiki, and then it started infusing guided meditation in it. So every week I did the same exact thing. It's a Reiki healing guided meditation. And so I like the idea of consistency in these sessions. So it's every single Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern time. And it's a great community of people. We usually get about 100 to 150 people a session from all over the world. And in that, one other thing to say is I also have a book that I wrote 15 years ago called Living and Loving Well. It's about people trying to break those patterns that we live our lives in. And I'm also a Reiki master. I've been a Reiki master for 10 years. And one of the big projects now that I share on Insight Timer with the group was, since 2015, I started this project called my Reiki Healing Peace Project. And I take train spikes, like 6-inch spikes that you find on a railroad track, and I infuse them with Reiki. And since 2015, I've scattered about 30 of them across the United States and Canada. And then I meditate and focus my energy on this healing network that's being created. And so I opened that up to my Insight Timer community about 2 months ago. And there's already spikes now in Ireland, England, Australia, Tasmania, going to Germany in a month. So it's expanded so fast now that this healing network is part of this experience. So when we do our meditations every week, we focus on this network as well.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that. What a great, and that's something I would have never known. So that's an awesome thing to share. All right. So thank you, everyone, for those amazing introductions. I'm going to turn it over to Melanie, who's going to do the hard work.
Hi. Well, thanks everybody for joining. If you have questions, yep, Sandra, you have a question, you can drop it in. And I have some other questions that we can get started with. And one of the questions that came in was for Carrie. And how did you get started channeling?
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for the question, whoever shared that question. So similar to Joe, I did start my training getting into energy healing in Reiki and becoming a Reiki master. And I found, you know, through doing energy healing, sometimes I would get imagery or sensations and, something was coming up, but I wasn't too sure how to build confidence in what that is. And so for channeling, one course that really supported me with that was learning to read the Akashic Records. I loved learning to read the Akashic Records. Before that, I'd also taken some shamanic courses where you would meet your spirit guide. And, through shamanism, there's a lot of symbology. And then it's learning to understand the symbology of these images through the Akashic Records. I find it's just this very direct, clear channel where information is coming to you. And there's this nice format. And that's the thing when we take courses is there's a format. There's something that our conscious mind can grasp onto for something that has nothing to do with the conscious mind. But it gives us these baby steps where we can start to surrender through that process and trust that what's coming through is coming through a higher source or a higher power. And once the first time you kind of just read this prayer or this opening intention in the Akashic Records. And once you read it, you trust, you let go, you're like, all right, I'm in the Akashic Records, meaning the records of an individual soul. So you can read it for yourself or for someone else if they're asking. And then boom, I was just getting this information coming in, and it was words I was seeing, like one word at a time. And I didn't even know what the sentence would say, but I would share the word and trust the next words that were coming. And in our practicum in this course, we were practicing with a partner, and the words that were coming through were actually in French. And I live in Canada, technically I should know French, but I don't know French at all. I was like, all right, let's just share this. And it made perfect sense to the person I was reading for because they are bilingual and they did know French. And to me, that was my sign of, all right, this is legitimate. This is real. There's no qualms about this. I can't question channeling or intuition, especially if I've been given a message in a language I don't understand that actually makes sense. And after, working with the Akashic Records for a little bit of time, I just learned to trust my own intuition. And I tended to move away from the lineages and the courses that I'd taken to just being an open channel. So that was a bit of my journey. Definitely, I loved having courses in the beginning, but then you just get into this state of trust through experience that, all right, this is real. I can't deny this anymore. I've had so much proof from people I've read for or my own intuition. I can't deny the truth of what's coming through. Yeah, that's what I wanted to share.
So
Thank you.
interesting.
So a question that we get all the time is sort of how did everyone get their start? And you guys, most of you have been on Insight Timer for a long time. I know I've been on Insight Timer as a user since 2016, but I just started actually in December. But it's a very common question. So what sort of motivated everyone to come to Insight Timer? And feel free to, Eileen.
Hi. Okay. This is such a great question. So for me, like I said a little bit in my intro, it started with the pandemic. In another chapter of my life, I was a fitness practitioner, a fitness instructor, and the gym closed down, just like a lot of gyms in the area because we were trying to be safe. And in that moment, I realized that the people I was working with were working on their bodies and like doing workouts at home, but they weren't comfortable with getting still and being in the quiet of their own mind. So I started leading meditations for that community. But then I had been a student on Insight Timer for so long, and it really sparked this flame within me that was like, wait a minute, I can be a teacher on there too. I mean, anyone can sign up and become a teacher, right? So I like to share. So I started that in 2020, started leading or recording my two live sessions or my two tracks, and then I was able to go live. But I always love to share that my tracks that I started recording with were not amazing. Um, I had like my music playing from my phone as I spoke into, or no, my music playing from my computer as I spoke into my phone, and then made that a recording. And so it was very much so, it was a free track, something that was not the best quality. And over the years now, I've learned to have better quality. But I just think that's important to share. And also, even with my tone and my cadence, I listened back to Sweet Eileen in 2020, and you can tell there was so much love behind it, but it was just maybe not the best cadence. And so as a teacher, I've learned and I've practiced, as we all know, is you have to really, really discover your voice, your cadence, and then I've grown ever since too. But I just think it's so important to share that you can start with what you have and just get your voice out there, and then practice and just evolve as a teacher. So yeah, I would say that that's kind of it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Carrie.
Yeah, my first, well, actually, I hadn't heard of the app. And at the time, I really just wanted to build a sense of spiritual community. I live in a small town, Canmore, Alberta. It's near Banff in the Rockies. And there just wasn't this big sense of spiritual community, I'd say, in the way that I desired, more intuitive and fun flowing, getting curious with mysticism. There was some mindfulness stuff. So I just started hosting meditations out of my basement suite where I was living at the time. I was renting, and sometimes I'd get as many, I think one time I had like 9 people there. It felt so rewarding, but many times 0 people would come. Hosting free events, that's just kind of how it goes. People become non-committal, and it brought me so much joy to share meditation, though, in the mystical sense with people and explore intuition. And so I went and I actually had a session with a healer in our town, an energy healer who's just extremely intuitive. And, she's given guidance to many of my like close friends on business decisions, and all of them have had so much success. And she said to me near the end of our session, "Carrie, you need to get on Insight Timer." And, I didn't take that lightly. So I got on, and I feel like that was a big reason for the success that I've had on Insight Timer, was because I was an earlier adapter. When there's less things, you have more time to build up listens, and then they're suggested earlier. And so I feel so fortunate that I was gifted that intuitive message from somebody that probably never would have crossed my mind until someone, I learned about it years later. So it brought me to the app and has become a big part of the work I do. 90% of my job has been Insight Timer the past few years. So I just feel super fortunate and lucky. And of course, it came through intuition. So yeah, just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Jill.
So it's kind of, I like this idea of things like unfolding through life that Eileen was mentioning, and I think Carrie was kind of alluding to the same thing. Is that, but historically in my past, I feel like I'm kind of like a psychic of all trades. Like instead of a jack of all trades, because my history has been like same thing that Carrie had, like this. I was a medium, I was channeler. I did so many things when I was young, but the experiences were a bit overwhelming for me. I think Carrie said that there was like a lack of confidence that she had to build into. And I feel like that I never really gained the confidence, even though I was really good. And so I kind of let that, I kept evolving into different forms. And that eventually led me to Reiki, which led me to like this other platform called HeyGo. And then when HeyGo shut down, these other teachers on HeyGo said, we're going to Insight Timer. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I'll check that out. And so even though I was a student on that, I had never even considered being a teacher on Insight, because I always thought it was for like really professional teachers. And I didn't think that that was something I could do. So I did the same thing that I think Eileen or Carrie mentioned, but I just recorded a track, my first track. And looking back on it, I'm talking really fast, and I should probably slow it down a little bit. But I've learned from the experience. And so it really evolved by just like a series of events that unfolded, and I just kind of followed that path there. That's the long answer.
Jill?
Thank you so much. I really love hearing Carrie talk about listening and trusting and intuition, because that's part of what I feel like my Yoga Nidra story is. I didn't come to the practices that I have through a healing crisis or trauma, like a lot of people do. I'm grateful for it, but a lot of times people ask me like, wow, like what happened that you started into this? So I used to train crazy horses that no one wanted. I worked in juvenile corrections, worked with both staff and offenders and even crime victims that other people didn't want to deal with. And I mention that because now at 62, I realize a lot of it is my voice, but I doubted my voice. And as Eileen was saying, way back, I didn't listen to my intuition. I didn't listen to what people were saying because I was like, oh, I couldn't get on Insight Timer. So as I continued to offer sessions, as I felt confident to start offering Yoga Nidra sessions, people would say, oh, you need to do this more. Then, like many of the teachers here, the pandemic hit and I could not do my in-person sessions. I couldn't be with the community, and I thought, how else can I help? I actually listened to Yoga Nidra, felt prompted, listened to intuition, and worked really, really hard with a lot of tech challenges to apply to a different app. And on that app, you literally had to do an interview, you had to apply, you had to upload tracks, which was good for me. And then I never heard back. And there was a part of me, again, as Eileen said, like listening, I didn't sense it or feel it as rejection. I was like, not right now with, I almost said the name, not right now with that app, but where else can I go? Because I really felt, and I was listening to keep being of service, like don't stop, don't let this stop you, be of service. Got on Insight Timer, and from being a listener, I thought the same thing. Where do I apply? What's the interview? Oh my gosh, what am I going to need to do? And it was simply upload your offering and they'll listen to it. So my first live was end of December. I was very, very nervous, more nervous about the tech part of it. And then a lot of, I want to mention too, there's so much support here on Insight Timer from the staff, or that's what I experienced. So we got to do a kind of a starter session without anybody there. They told me all the bells and whistles. At that time, we could use an iPad, which was helpful. So I started primarily because I listened to my intuition. My mom and dad had always taught me to be of service to people. And then Yoga Nidra came along, and I knew that that's how I was to do this. But I would not have done it, I don't think, without the support of the Insight Timer staff and then supportive listeners. They kept giving me feedback going, when are you going to do another live? I was thinking, okay, I'm going to do one live and who knows what will happen. And people are like, okay, when's the next one? I was like, oh, okay, I guess I better schedule one. So shout out to Insight Timer staff and listeners telling, you tell us as teachers what you want and what you need. So I got started by listening to my intuition, and especially because for me, it's big to be of service to people.
Thank you so much, Jill. Banu?
Yes, so, I've been teaching for a long time in many different venues in addition to my psychotherapy practice. And what I realized with the pandemic, I couldn't do my classes in person, and, came to the platform and started doing live sessions almost weekly since January of 2020. And it was just such a beautiful avenue to share, because I'm getting to the age now too, where I'm in transition of how do I do a soft retirement from my psychotherapy and clinical responsibilities and to do more mentoring and just teaching. Like, I've been gifted so much, great information, and, learn from Peter Levine for somatic experiencing work. And, I've had many, many gifts, and how can I share this at this stage in my life to be able to help others? And the response has just been so beautiful. I think my first live, I had maybe 10 people, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And, I just want to just drop into a tiny little experiential right now for this moment of part of our ventral vagal system which is part of the parasympathetic, is all about connection. And as we're listening to stories, I just want all of you, there's like almost 100 people on here right now, we're all here for a reason, and see if you can get a body felt sense of connecting with each other. Because our body's always in present time. And when we have that safe connection, it is very good and deep medicine for our nervous system, for managing our stress response, and for feeling connected. So I don't plan on retiring this part of my work for a long time, and look forward to hopefully next year Insight Timer will launch their events and retreats. And so I'm really looking forward to doing more offerings on the nervous system, on mindful aging, on how do we increase our sense of safety in the world, and how to really work with our particular nervous system that we were born with to be more regulated. My little motto always was, changing the world one nervous system at a time. So thanks.
Thank you, Joe.
That was really beautiful. I do have to add that.
Yeah, agreed. Are we supposed to raise our hand for a question, or we can just jump in? Okay. Yeah, Bono, I agree with you 100%, where this idea of connection, it almost gives, like during these weekly Reiki sessions that I do, during the guided meditation part, I really try to ask people to allow themselves to connect with all the other people in the session, where we're all trying to share positivity, love, and support toward one another. And I feel my intuitive side tells me that asking them to connect with the rest of the people gives them permission to not hold themselves in judgment, or not to give themselves permission to let go of all that self-doubt and fear that they have in their head, and allow them to be part of the session in a more present tone. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Do a quick response. I mean, that is so powerful in itself. And to bring that sense of connection into a felt body sense, like that is where we really begin to affect nervous system change, where we actually can change our physiology. And, when we have that oxytocin connection hormone going, it is actually helps us stress proof. There's all these receptor sites on our heart for oxytocin that help mitigate stress damage if we can either receive support or offer support. And so that's so beautiful.
Yes, thank you guys. I'm going to follow up with a question. Dawn asked a great question, but I'm going to get to that in a minute. This question is really related to what we just talked about, and a question I know I get all the time in my lives because I do intuitive baking and cooking. And as someone who has literally been following their intuition since they were 4, and I've never second guessed myself on anything, people ask me all the time, how do you follow your intuition? What does that mean? And how do you do it? Because we want to do it. So do any of you all have advice to people on how to start trusting themselves and following their intuition? Eileen.
I feel like there's so many ways we could all answer this, which is so beautiful. I think that something I've learned is our inner critic and our fear and all the self-doubt and all the stories we tell ourselves can be really loud, whereas our intuition is really quiet. And it's like that soft, quiet voice that I think we all hear in meditation. And so I know that meditation is the path to making that intuition voice just a little bit louder. And then I feel like, to piggyback off of Banu, is just that feeling sense in your body. When you're following your intuition, when it feels good in your heart and in your body, and you feel open and it feels in alignment. So I think following your intuition is being in connection with your body, trusting that intuition, that heart-led path, or the next best step, and then getting quiet really, really often so that you can hear that whisper.
Beautiful. Thank you. Dia.
Yeah, so along the same lines of what Elaine was just saying, but one thing I always do for myself and I teach my clients is to, I call it moment to moment awareness of what are you feeling and what do you need? Because so often we can be in our minds and in the doing of life rather than just taking a moment to pause, hand on heart, take that breath, and then what am I feeling? And not judging it, right? Not analyzing it, not having to change it, but just this simple openness to what am I feeling? And then, okay, well, I see that you're feeling, and then what do you need? You know, this little self-talk. And then when you're so deeply connected with what you're feeling and what you're needing, you can't miss the intuition. It's there.
Joe. Joe, you're muted.
It's like a business meeting. Yeah, I agree with Eileen and Dia. I would just add to what they're saying, and say that there's a difference between the voice in the head and the voice in your heart, right? And the voice in your heart is the one that's really kind of your intuitive voice, not the busy voice that you're hearing in your head that's kind of giving you those doubtful thoughts. So I would just say, just sprinkle a little courage into your day and trust that voice in your heart. And then the next day you'll feel a little more courageous, and the next day you'll feel a little more courageous, and it kind of like will grow from there.
Banu.
I would add to that is that, our digestive system is called our second brain, and it's our gut intuition and our gut instincts. And so to develop and to sense into your intuition, know your own cues. Like what is a yes in your body for something? What is a no, or what is a maybe? So that you begin to kind of understand your own bio-individuated sense of your intuition. It's going to be different than somebody else. I had to learn that a long time ago. And one of the things I realized was my intuition comes like a little Chiron at the bottom of my mind, body, heart screen. And there's like this active thing happening. And there's this, why don't you ask about this? And it's like, I've learned to trust that little nudge, but I feel it in my body. And we all have different ways and cues, and your body doesn't lie. So it will always tell you the truth.
Thank you. Jill.
Thank you. In addition to what Banu, or kind of a lead off on what Banu was saying, I know a lot of people, they have difficulty trusting their body or listening. So one thing is, I would say, get on Alive. Almost all of us are going to offer you something that in some way is a somatic practice. So for those of you listening, if that's something that you're struggling with, maybe set an intention that after Alive or during Alive, that's your focus. And I do like to stay in the present, so it's rare that I mention this, but I would say, either during or after a meditation or a mindfulness practice or being on Alive, go back and look at times in your life when you know your intuition has served you, and look back a little bit at what you were either thinking, if you're more of a thinking person, or feeling beforehand. So I know for me, I have lots of times where I was like, oh, here we go again. I'm currently in Mexico. I was not planning to buy a house down here. I was not planning to move down here. Made a couple visits, literally walked into a house, and the realtors going through the house, my friends are upstairs, like, oh, what do you think about the floor plan? And I stood there for a moment and I heard, buy it. And my response wasn't like, oh my, like what? It was, oh, here we go again. Because I bought my first commercial product. I had a yoga nidra studio in Sacramento, California. Like, I know real estate, I've invested. It's not a good idea necessarily to buy commercial property, but I walked into that space. It didn't look inviting at all. And I heard this voice. And I was like, okay, Clearly I'm supposed to do yoga nidra. When I walked into my house in Mexico, instant recognition of, and I wasn't hallucinating, wasn't hallucinating. And I literally said, here we go again. And so I invite all of you, no matter how old you are, your intuition is always knocking on that door. It is almost always talking. And think back to times when you went, wow, I made a really good decision. Wow, that felt good. And start kind of looking backwards, if you will, at what that feels like. And then, as Joe said, practice that daily. Look for those signs daily. So look back a little bit in your past to see where your intuition has been telling.
I think that's such great advice, because one thing that I know from, I've been teaching for almost 30 years, is that people don't follow their intuition because they're always told you're wrong, you're not doing it right. And so I think what you just said about thinking back to a moment, reflecting when you were right, and reinforcing that, because that noise that we hear from other people saying no, 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 is what people remember. But trying to remember those moments is critical, and tapping into that intuition. So thank you so much for that. Carrie?
Yeah, what everybody shared is so on point, and I wanted to share some of the off-camber ways our intuition can speak to us also, the unexpected ways. You know, we talk about the heart being that conduit, the stomach, the digestive system, but in fact, you know, every part of our body is a conduit for intuition. Jill, talking about that, opening that door to intuition, I feel like we have like 1,000 doors in our body through our extrasensory perceptions. So Jill, that inner voice you had say buy the house, and like, oh, that I think of like a psychic in extrasensory perception, or it may be goosebumps, you know, physical sensations in our body. We may feel resistance, a literal push away or a pull towards. One of my big intuitive messages now is actually fear. If I feel afraid of something, that's my calling to go towards that thing. You know, it's not always a pleasant way our intuition speaks to us. It may be a resistance or a fear, or, you know, trying to get away from that thing. But that may in fact be our soul calling us towards that thing. The indicator for that, I find the greatest one, is a sense of inner knowing. And often people will share this in some of the intuitive courses I have on Insight Timer. They'll say, you know, I'm not getting messages through my intuition. I'm not seeing them. I'm not hearing them. I'm not feeling them. But then they'll share their experience, and there's this sense of knowing, like we can't really describe it. There's no, you know, we're not thinking it, we're not feeling it, but we just kind of know deep down that there's this yes, or there's this no. And actually the one that I missed that I did want to share too is our mind, because we think that the mind is the blocker to the intuition, and it can be, but also the intuition can speak through our mind. So many times I've channeled for people and I've shared messages with them, and they're like, oh yeah, I've thought that many times. I've had that thought. And I'm like, that was actually your intuition, because here I am, a total stranger, sharing that exact same message with you that you bypassed and you thought was just a regular thought, when in fact it was your intuition speaking to you. So intuition can get tricky in that it can appear in the same way as a thought as well. And to decipher, I find just leaning back into this inner knowing, this thing we can't really define, but it is that inner, yes, this feels good. Like you said, Eileen, something just feels good to us or brings us joy, or no, it doesn't feel right. I find that's that inner knowing we can lean into.
Thank you so much for that, Carrie. Banu?
Yes, Joe in the Zoom chat made a comment about, can trauma make your body speak a different answer? And yes, it can, right? Because trauma kind of does this reorganization in our nervous system that leads us to more protective states and defensive states. And so when we haven't had an opportunity to work with our trauma or to understand how our nervous system is set up, we can respond or react from our trauma history. And we, can be hard to kind of pull apart, like what's intuition and what's my, past trauma trigger. And so this is where I've found the nervous system, understanding polyvagal theory, and am I in my dorsal freeze response right now? If that's something that I do, in these situations, that's probably my trauma history talking as opposed to my intuition. Or if I'm in my more reactive sympathetic fight flight, oh yeah, okay, this is anxiety, and so it takes time, right? It takes presence, it takes being curious about your own system to begin to tease apart these pieces from our past history, our deep knowing, our body knowing, and simple tools like orienting, like, am I really in danger right now in this moment? Oh, that's a past response. Right now, what am I feeling? And so we can begin to get familiar with a voice that doesn't come from our trauma history.
Yes, thank you. And as someone who has anxiety, that's, that can be confusing, right? You're like, wait, no, this feels like bad. This is wrong. So that's a really important reminder, and I appreciate that. And someone sent me on Instagram, does anybody have any physical sensations they feel when their intuition is on par? So if anybody does, please answer it. Raise your hand. If not, we'll move on to Dawn's amazing question. Joe, go ahead.
That's a really fast answer. I mean, I think we've kind of touched on it before. I think it's that feeling in your chest, right? It's that voice in your chest that is so powerful for me. So it feels very physical. Like I know I can tell the difference between the anxiety now or a trauma-based response or whatever it is. And it's like I think Jill, like the whole Mexico thing to me is so fascinating because I've thought about doing just that, but I haven't had the courage to go. But there's still a pull that I feel in my chest to say, I think you're going to be going somewhere abroad, right, to live. And so I don't know how that works, but I guess to answer the question is that it's a physical feeling in my chest, in my heart space that guides me.
Thank you. I know for me, when my intuition is super strong and I know it's the right thing, like I had that experience in my home, my whole body was tingling. It just felt like every nerve ending was overreacting in a good way. Okay, Dawn asked this amazing question so long ago. So Dawn, thank you for being patient. Dawn asked, which of your tracks really reflects you as a guide? Dia.
This one was really easy for me. It was my very first track. And it was a really special track because it came at a time when I was going through a lot of transformation myself. And I just said, my brother-in-law has a recording studio, and I said, I want to come in to do a meditation. And I had my sister there, her daughter, and my daughter, and it was all this beautiful feminine energy. And I had no idea what I was going to say. And we just sat down and they were Om chanting, and I had my singing bowl and I just began to speak. And it was just so powerful and so moving. And it's still like my favorite track. And it became my track for any time where I just needed to come back to myself. So I know it's called Welcome Home to Stillness.
That's beautiful. Eileen?
I have a hard time picking one. So I'll pick one of my, I think, most listened ones is Quieting the Inner Critic. And it's kind of ironic because now listening back, it's one that I'm like, it could be better, or, and my inner critic is very loud. So I think it really reflects me as a guide, because it's also what brought me to meditation was how loud my inner critic was growing up in school and middle school, high school, college. I was really, really hard on my body and just how I looked and who I was as a person. And it's really been just this whole journey. Meditation has allowed me to really quiet that inner critic and that negative self-talk and Return to Love, which is the name of my new course. So I think that one also reflects me as a guide too, because all of my meditations, I feel like, just have this undercurrent of self love and compassion and being kind to your mind and just really practicing that. Yeah.
I love Return to Love. That's amazing. Banu?
So when I sat on all these ideas churning for my 21-day course on Explore Your Nervous System, and I felt such a drive to get this out somewhere, that it could be there into perpetuity or however long the platform lasts. And it kind of is a synthesis of, my own process and what I've learned, about my body, and honoring my clients' journeys, with their nervous systems. And so I think that one really reflects, as well as my mindful aging course. So my mom is still, on the planet. She's in a different state, but she's 102. And so over the last 11 years, when I've been long distance caretaking her and being with her, going there 60 different times, we've had such deep talks on death and dying and purpose and what is a life well lived. And so I also felt that really strong urge to do a mindful aging course, which is on Insight Timer. That's a 14-day class to, at any age, how can we enliven ourselves in our, how can we feel alive for as long as we can? Because we don't know, things are impermanent. And she's gifted me with so much insight and just having a dialogue. And elders are so needing to talk about these things, and so many families can't. And so I'm glad that course is also out. It's a lot of questions, a lot of inquiry about yourself and your journey and what's important to you and your relationship with death and your experiences. And so that one really comes from my heart, in honor of my mom.
That's really beautiful. Joe?
This first one that comes to mind is a track that's actually one of my least played tracks, but it goes back to this idea of intuition, right? I was flipping through this Walt Whitman book a while ago, and I wasn't really reading it, I was just flipping through it. And this line, I read this line, and my very first thought was, I'm going to make a meditation on that. It was so powerful. And the line is, I believe in you, my soul. And so that's the name of the track. It's just called I Believe in You, My Soul. That one to me is the closest to my heart, because I believe with all of my heart and soul that we are these spiritual beings that come to this earth to learn and to grow and to evolve. And so part of that is saying to myself that, yes, I believe in that aspect of who I am. So that's my answer.
Thank you. Carrie?
Two come up. I have to share them both because they're kind of opposite spectrums, but the first one I think is a reflection of having fun on our spiritual journey. I think it's called Elves, Fairies, and Unicorns, Fairies, Elves, and Unicorns, but it's for adults. Often these tracks are made for children to enjoy, but in the spirit realm, we get to have fun. We can connect to these entities and guides and have an experience with them. And that's also one of my least listened to tracks, same as you, Joe, but it just lights my soul up listening to it. So I'd say that's a good reflection of me. But then on the other side of the spectrum, we'll say the shadow self. I work with a lot of mental health issues in my own life. And so one of my favorite tracks on that is called Chakra Alignment for Depression. And it's just a supportive tool. I think when we're going through depression, anxiety, dark night of the soul, any mental health issue, we need to approach it in the way that feels best for us. And for some of us, maybe we're really into the energy body and into the chakras. Hey, there's a track for that where you can tune into each chakra and see, what would be fulfilling for it while dealing with some darkness and some heaviness. And so it's, I wouldn't say a joyful practice, because joy is a tricky word when you're in depression. It feels inaccessible, but we'll say a contentment practice in a way of experiencing depression, but also, you know, through the practice of, say, feelingization as opposed to visualization, finding a feeling within us, within a darkness, you know, finding some light within us and raising that up and nourishing that and watering that. So that's one of my other favorite tracks I wanted to share.
Thank you. Joe, did you want to add something?
Yeah, thanks for seeing that. I just want to share, I mean, add to what Carrie was saying about this, the idea of this, the shadow self and the and sadness, and it goes back to this other meditation that I wrote that's on there that is really personal to me for the same reasons, right? And it's called Reflection on Grief. And to me, it took me so long to write this because I understand that grief is so personal and so subjective. The way one person grieves is not at all the way another person grieves. And so I was trying to be so thoughtful of writing this meditation so that it wasn't at all minimizing someone's experience, right? And I incorporate this idea in there. So I used it to try to help people in the sense that, like when my mother died, I used the experience in that track, and how I leaned real heavily into gratitude, and how gratitude saved me from that sense of grief, you know? So that's what the whole track's about, is like using gratitude, something positive, to shift your mindset out of a sad state of grief or out of that shadow self or whatever it is that's pulling you down, you know? So thanks for letting me respond to that.
Yes, of course. Violet, did you want to add anything to that?
I was going to say that a track that really represents me is anything that has Blossom Violet's music playing in the background. Because, you know, she's got that track Dance of Inner Peace. In case anyone has missed it, that's my favorite piano track. And I have put it in like 2 or 3 of my tracks already. But seriously though, I was thinking about that. It's a hard question. I got on Insight Timer with my scripting tracks because I just wanted to get on Insight Timer. I didn't really know what to do. And not too long ago, I did 2 tracks. One was about finding my voice, which is definitely representative of me because I'm such an introvert. And for me to be doing this was really how I found my voice, because I was normally very shy, didn't like being on camera. So I would say finding my voice is the one that best represents me. And I'm going to have to put Blossom's music in the background of that. So I'm going to have to redo that track. Thank you.
Yes, and her music is beautiful. I think you can actually add her music to any track, because when you're listening to a track, you can add ambient music. So we can all add Blossom Violet's beautiful music to any track we listen to. And for me, I want to say, and I think this is something that I came to realize recently, as some of you know, is teaching just cooking and baking and mindfulness for so long, I sort of had myself in that box. And then I had this recent cancer diagnosis, and I heard other people on, Insight Timer talking about their own experiences with cancer. And I realized, as someone who uses affirmations so much, that it was sort of important for me to put that out there on Insight Timer. And I made 8 tracks, and the response has been so overwhelming that I never would have thought that. And these are ones that I just made, and I think they're really resonating with people because I think people need them. So thank you. And Joe, this is a question from me. I want to know where you got the idea to use spikes and infuse them with Reiki and put them all over the world, and why spikes?
So it was the universe responding. I really do believe that there's power in manifestation. It happens, right, if you let it. So I'm very ADD, so I have a million projects going on. And so when I first started Reiki and I became a Reiki master, like literally the idea just popped in my head. I'm like, I'm going to do spikes. Not spikes, but I thought I'm going to do a network of Reiki healing. And I said to myself, I don't know what I'm going to use, but I trust the universe will provide it. That very next day, I was going to pick up a beehive in like an hour and a half from my house, because I'd never done beehiving before, right? And so I was going down the southern part of, I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. And so I was leaving, and I came to a stop, and right next to the railroad, like the stop sign, there was a railroad track, and there was a pile of railroad ties there, the spikes. And I'm like, oh, that's exactly what I'm supposed to use. So I stopped my car, I picked them all up, they were all rusty, and I filled the trunk up. And that's what I've been using for the last 10 years to do that. Yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to believe that an hour has already gone by. So I would love it if everybody could just remind all the people that have joined how they can find you here on Insight Timer, looking at your link tree, the best way to support you, and anything that you'd like people to know. Joe.
I think just more of the same. I think I just want to give a shout out to the community that follows me on Insight Timer, because they've been with me prior to Insight, and they're just such an amazing group of individuals that really want to make a difference in this world. And even though I'm the person that's speaking in the session, I can't see their faces. Their contribution is just as big as mine, in that session. So shout out to them. I would just say, join my sessions, listen to the tracks, and be part of the solution to make the world a better place.
Love it. Thank you. Eileen.
Yeah, I would say definitely follow me on Insight Timer. Of course, I do host live sessions Tuesdays and Thursdays. And something I always love to say is that someone in this very moment is feeling something very similar to you, if not the same exact way as you. And so let that comfort you. And even right here, right now, everyone listening, I think it's just so beautiful that we can all be alone on our phones or behind our computer screen, but we're really not ever alone. We're very, very, very connected. And I hope we can continue to feel that light and that energy from each other. And the best way you can support me is by continuing to show up on Insight Timer and enjoying all of our tracks here as teachers, of course. But I'm really excited about my new course, Return to Love. And it's about quieting the inner critic, reconnecting to your inner friend. And I share some of my favorite, more practical tools and tips to that, and somatic experiencing and releasing and shaking. And then also just some work on self-compassion. And then there's guided meditations at the end of each of those lessons to really integrate it. But yeah, I would love to see you Tuesdays and Thursdays or when I go live. Thank you so much, Violet and Melanie and everyone here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Carrie.
Yeah, support and connection. I do have a group called Carrie Sewall's Intuitive Sharing Circle on Insight, where we chat together. I love people suggesting their favorite meditations. We can all just collectively share what our favorite ones are, and we can actually do group meditations together. So that's kind of a fun feature on Insight. I love seeing people at lives, and donations are always like such a joy to receive a donation. When I look at my donation page and I'm just like, I just feel like, you feel extra appreciated, or seeing those comments in the reviews, those comments of appreciation. And I find, when there's lives I attend, I'm going to leave a donation. I'm not saying people have to leave a donation. Obviously, it depends on your financial situation, but it is a joy and it is a treat. And for a lot of Insight teachers, we do this out of the goodness of our hearts, but it's always above and beyond when I'll speak for myself. When I receive a donation, I feel extra appreciated. So thank you for everyone who has done that.
And I'm just going to add to that, because if anybody knows me, I have a business and I'm actually a proponent of talking about money. And I know it makes people very uncomfortable, but I think it's important. And like you said, Carrie, not everybody can do that. But if people can, I think it's an amazing way to support everyone here. I've been to everyone's lives on here, and it's an energy exchange and it's time. But if you can't, strongly listen to people to encourage listening to tracks and courses, because that is an amazing way to support teachers, especially now with some of the changes on Insight Timer. So thank you for saying that. Banu?
Yes, and along that line, I'll also say, if you do listen to one of our premium tracks in particular, and then come back to the platform the next day, that also is a little bit of a bonus. And so the more that you can, if you don't have the resources to support with a financial donation, listen to the premium tracks especially. But I also want to shout out, there are so many of the people that come to my lives that are on the live today. And so I just feel so honored that you give your time to spend time with me in the live sessions. And it is a very, it's an experience of coherence and connection and cohesion. And so you can find my information on Insight Timer and follow me there. I usually do lives on Saturdays at 11 Mountain Time, and hope to see many of you tomorrow. We're going to be talking about working somatically with overwhelm. So thank you all. Thank you, Melanie, for pulling this together, and Violet.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Dia.
Yeah, I'm just so reminded of what a great platform this is, because I'm feeling so nourished from having been here with all of you, and you're all such brilliant and talented and just giving from the heart. So I just want to reflect that it's really moved me to be here. So thank you. And thanks for everybody who's showed up to be on the live. And you can support me personally by following me on Insight Timer. And I do have a group that has been a bit dormant that I'd like to re-energize. It's called A Return to the Feminine. And I'll be running some lives called A Woman's Way to Sovereignty, which has been my journey, and I'm excited to share it with you all. So yeah, come join me.
Thank you. Jill.
A big thanks to everybody who is listening. It's been great to be here with the other teachers. I've listened to their tracks, but to see all their faces. For me, not so much a request for support. I always like to hear from people what they need from me. That's just the way that I am. So I know that I get a lot of good feedback on my Yoga Nidra lives, and I do prefer just to do those lives. I don't have a track for that. But I think all of us are in agreement that, you know, throughout the world it's changing, just many different things and circumstances are changing. I feel like people are needing more and more support in very unique and different ways. So I would just say to me, reach out to me if you need something beyond Yoga Nidra, something beyond the 3 tracks that I offered. If there's any way I can support people at all, some of the people's comments, you know, we're speaking to what they're needing and what they're going through. Yes, it's great if you follow me, if you love the Yoga Nidra, and then the recordings that I have. But I would love to hear from people as to like, what are your specific needs? Because I'm happy to offer that if I can. And again, a big, big thank you for having me here, Violet, Melanie, and I see BD in the comments. Thank you, BD, for connecting me to all of this.
Joe.
So I think I end every session on Fridays with the same thing, with the same expression. So would you mind if I say what it is?
No, not at all. But
Okay.
we're not ending yet, but say it.
Oh, okay. All right. So every week I end the sessions by saying the same thing, which is this second, this minute, this hour, this day, this week, this month, this year, this life, and every lifetime hereafter is going to be amazing and abundant and full of love and joy and acceptance, because that is our will, and our will be done.
Thank you. So, and for me, I am here every Sunday doing lives with cooking or baking. And then I have other ones, like I have one coming up on a week from tonight where I'm making fire cider and elderberry syrup. And then I also do one for teachers that are more pre-K through 12 as opposed to Insight Timer teachers, and doing heart-centered teaching and leading from that. And I do my affirmations for those with cancer and chronic illness. And I don't have a ton of tracks because lives are my thing. That's how I connect best with people, but I do have some, so you can always listen to them. And I want to just bring everyone's attention to the chat because Barb asked, hey, what's the story with donations? So Barb, I know Carrie and I addressed that, but so everyone can hear, there are financial donations that people give. If you're contributing on an Apple device, Apple does take 30% of that. If it's an Android, we do get 100%. And then Carrie had mentioned the return rate, which is a little bit complicated, I think. I don't know about you guys, but
Very
there is a
complicated.
yeah, I don't want to speak about it because I think even Insight Timer isn't fully there on how it's working 100%, but essentially when you listen to tracks and you come back, it boosts our track ratings. It does not apply to lives. I know because I specifically asked Insight Timer. It applies to tracks. So that's why listening to tracks now is very important for teachers because it boosts their rating system on Insight Timer. And as just a side note, as someone who's a teacher and I have a school and then I teach in a public school, I'm not a grade believer. And to me, this kind of reminds me of that. And I just want to remind everybody to show up and be the best of who they are, because that's all that matters. Violet, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. And I'm going to say that I know Melanie was talking about donations and she's not afraid to talk about money, which is amazing. And she knows that I am. I'm the complete opposite. And she has been my coach trying to help me get past these money blocks that I have. I never ask for donations. Honestly, I've not even made money on Insight Timer. I think I've gotten maybe $30 a month on occasion because I mean, I don't know. It's just me. I just don't ask for donations. When I get donations, I pay them forward to a couple of animal rescues that I support. So, Melanie has been my coach. She's trying to help me to get past these things. And I'm getting there slowly but surely. If Insight Timer suddenly becomes a way for me to make money, I'd be thrilled. I have a full-time job, thank goodness, a good one too. Obviously in technology, which is what I love. But yeah, I've always had this thing. I don't talk about money. I don't ask for money. Donations make me feel weird. So I'm one of those people. But I want to thank everybody who came and connected with us. I love the comments I get on the tracks I make. I mentioned earlier that my first couple of tracks were absolutely horrible and they're still out there and I'd like to redo them. So thank you to the people who have listened to them and have paid me these beautiful compliments, because as Jill knows, I squirm when someone pays me a compliment. I don't know how to take it. So I mean, I do. I say thank you, but I'm like, oh no, they don't really mean that. They're just being nice. I'm working on all that stuff. So I want to thank everybody for your support. I want to thank all the teachers for your time. Thank you, BD and JV, who have sent a lot of these amazing teachers my way, because I love getting to know them. I'm going to be checking out a lot of the teachers who are here. I've checked out some of your stuff, but I'm going to definitely be attending some of your lives too as well. I never go to the yoga lives because I'm like, oh, I don't really do them. I just kind of watch, but I'm going to participate. I know no one can see me. And that's it. So keep sending teachers our way. Follow the teachers who are here. The link is in my teacher's profile. I had a pause there, so I didn't say it. Check out my teacher's profile, and I upload all the replays to Insight Timer. And Alejandro, thank you. Very sweet of you making a donation. Thank you for acknowledging my money block. And with that, we are going to say goodbye. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was very fun.
Yeah,
Thank you.
wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for all the 160 people that are here with us.
Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah.
absolutely.
Thank you.
All
See you all
right,
soon.
everybody.